At least this trench filled back in. We will be working on these trenches here. As we have been working in the trenches, it's been fascinating to think about what happened at each layer of soil. There's this black layer. It's probably asphalt millings. Not sure exactly, but it just kind of exists. But why is there so much dirt on top of it? Just makes you wonder, how long ago was it done? And why did they have to bring the soil up that far to make it work? But that's our driveway for sure. But one thing that we were surprised to find was a foundation. Probably a foundation of an old house. Not sure where that house stood. I hadn't heard about any other house, but we really had a hard time digging through all this stuff. Had to pull out a concrete saw, and then the excavator helped bust it up. But the electricians have been here, have been getting the conduit put up onto the wall. They were telling me there's almost too much conduit, and would I mind removing one more section of concrete so they could get our networking cables installed on the wall. I'm going to talk to a friend of mine who's into networking and advising me on all this anyway, so we'll see what we end up doing. But the project is moving on in this direction. But today, it's not what we'll be working on. We have other fish to fry. We're trying to do all the projects at one time. Hey, Cassie. Walter got out of his kennel last night. We're assuming that's because of there must have been an animal that came. It's the only time he'll climb that 6-foot fence. Cassie's good. She doesn't get out. So this caution tape seems like a joke and something silly, but it's actually rooted in seriousness. There's a legal liability that I have if people come on my construction project and they fall in the trench and I didn't try and warn them. So we don't want any of that. Caution tape is relatively inexpensive, and we'll do what we can to keep everybody safe. Don't ask me why those people who come on this wouldn't be charged for trespassing, but I'm not a lawyer. Nathan's been up since 6:30 this morning working on the excavator. I asked him last night what time he was getting up. He was the one who said 6:30 and smiled. I'm not gonna mind. He loves this thing. You never know what you're going to find in this soil. It doesn't cease to amaze us. But just this morning, Nathan found a wire. Not sure what it is. And in 100 years of this farm, why would they need a wire out here? We have overhead power lines right there. That's what we're trying to get rid of. But just a single strand, little almost coax cable is what it looks like. Who knows? Here's another treasure that we found. Just a dead cow and all her bones. Not entirely surprised when a cow dies. Here on ranches and farms, they dig a pit and bury it. There's not much else to do with it, especially if it's sick and wasn't intentionally slaughtered. It's not going to be worth very much. All along the river here, there's a risk of flooding. 2018, there was a flood upriver. There's quite a bit of flooding. But in this particular field, this dike held just fine, but the neighbor's dike didn't, and they were running a motorboat with a skier behind it in their field because it broke up there. So there's maybe some work to be done before the next risk of flood, bring that dike up to where it should be. But early in the mid 1900s, they would bring vehicles and dump them in this dike to prevent erosion. And as we dug this trench, here's another little goodie we found. I believe that to be a tractor tire. There's metal, rubber. You find car parts all along here. In fact, down the bank, they just drove entire cars off the bank and had them sit there to prevent erosion. Army Corps of Engineers has been involved and helped create it. You can see right up there is that what they made on the other side of the river. The flooding was worse in the 1960s on the other side, destroying lots of houses. This side of the river was fine, and our house sits up above the risk zone. But we have found lots of little surprises in digging this trench. Every time I have a patient on the weekends, it interrupts our Saturday mornings, or our weekend mornings. So I got to run to the hospital, but thankfully Nathan's able to carry on, and maybe the other boys will be up and at it soon. Okay, and just like that, he's finished up with the trench. So if only we had all the irrigation parts that we need, then we can finish this up.
Pull the pipe away a little bit. Nope. I'm sure it's gonna go.
You got it now. Heat that pipe up so it gets in there. You put your hand in the other end.
I think I have a little bit left to go.
Just trying to add more pipe. Now that we've turned the corner, added one more riser, we're on our way. It's being done. Telephone poles down the road. Just had to pull this one out of the ground. I want all vertical poles gone from this property. See our massive concrete pile. concrete. The dump wants to call it an environmental disaster. They want to charge me a bunch of money. Local concrete busting company will take the concrete if it doesn't have rebar. And then I have to pay them $120 an hour to come load it out. We'll see what we can do. About mid-morning, Nathan asked me if we worked really hard, could he go shooting in the afternoon and sight in the rifle in preparation for the youth hunt next weekend. It's pretty hard to turn down that request when your 13-year-old gets up before you, starts the day's project, and works really hard for weeks on end for what seems to be an eternal project that we just keep unearthing and opening more and more of it. And so thankfully we live on property that allows us to not have to drive anywhere. And we set up the targets and he was able to sight in his guns, and Natalie and Thomas wanted to be a part of it until the noise got to be too much and it got to be too cold.